Welcome to Whispers in the Dark True Horror Stories. Tonight, we have 7 spine-chilling tales straight from the heart of Alabama, each one more terrifying than the last. From encounters with mysterious figures on lonely roads to horrifying revelations from the past, these are stories that will keep you up at night. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and get ready to listen to 7 true scary stories in Alabama. Don't forget to stay until the end, you won't want to miss what comes next. Story 1, I was followed for 60 miles in the dark and no one believed me. Around 2007, I was working on my PhD at the University of Florida and living alone in a small apartment in Gainesville. I was a 30-year-old woman who enjoyed peace, quiet, and independence. One day, I received a message from Mark, an old college acquaintance from a philosophy class. We weren't close, but we had gone on a few group camping trips back in the day. I remembered him as quiet but polite. Mark told me he was on a cross-country hike to raise funds for national forest preservation. But the winter in Alabama had gotten too harsh, and he needed to pause. He asked if he could crash at my place for a few weeks until the weather warmed up. I hesitated but remembered him as a decent guy, so I agreed. A mutual friend drove Mark from Alabama to Gainesville. We had a pleasant Thanksgiving together, but then, Mark just stayed. A few weeks turned into a few months. He didn't do anything wrong, really. He just spent his days reading, watching TV, or wandering around the apartment complex. I was usually staying at my boyfriend's place, so it didn't bother me much at first. But eventually, it started to feel like too much. When spring finally came, Mark said he was ready to get back on the trail. He asked if I could drive him to the exact spot in Alabama where he'd stopped. Wanting my space back, I agreed. We left early in the morning, and I remember the trip taking about 5 to 6 hours. I dropped him off just after sunset at a desolate intersection in the middle of nowhere. After we waved goodbye, I turned around and started the drive back to Florida, and that's when the nightmare began. Since I was in unfamiliar territory, my outdated GPS led me onto a shortcut through narrow forest roads in Alabama. There were no street lights, no houses, just endless stretches of pitch-black road cutting through towering pines. I'd driven alone at night many times before, but this felt different. A car appeared behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. But mile after mile, it never passed, never turned, just stayed the exact same distance behind me. I tried to tell myself they were probably headed the same way. But then, I passed through a small town with 2 closely spaced intersections. My GPS told me to turn left at the second one, but I accidentally got into the left lane too early, by the first. When the light turned green, I decided to just keep going straight and turn at the next light. The car behind me did the exact same thing. That's when I knew I was being followed. A knot formed deep in my gut, like an invisible hand squeezing my stomach. Not hunger. Not normal nerves. It was that instinctual dread, the kind you get after hearing too many real-life horror stories and praying you won't be next. I called my boyfriend, my voice already shaking beyond control. He, like so many men who've never had to fear being followed, just laughed gently. "You're overthinking it." I closed my eyes for a second, trying not to lose it. "Can you please look up the local police number for me? I have no idea where I am." "Come on. Just keep driving. You're almost home." I went silent. As if I'd just described a fuzzy dream, not the bone-chilling reality I was trapped in. I hung up. My hands trembled on the wheel. And in that moment, I realized, no one was going to save me. I had to save myself. Then the worst thing happened. My gas was running low. The warning light blinked red, pulsing like a heartbeat. I glanced at the fuel gauge. My heart started to race. It had been nearly 30 miles with no sign of a gas station. If my car died out here in the Alabama woods, no lights, no people, what would happen? The car behind me kept trailing close. Never passing, never falling back. I couldn't see the driver, their windows were dark, headlights glaring. But I could feel them watching me, locking onto me with some sinister intent. I started wondering, maybe it was my University of Florida license plate. Maybe they thought I was a man? Or worse, maybe I was just randomly chosen, a woman alone in an old sedan, a target. Nearly 60 miles. Almost 2 hours. I tried to stay calm, but sweat was trickling down the back of my neck. When the first signs of a small town shimmered in the distance, I decided to make my move. At a red light, I pretended to be on a call and turned all the way around to stare directly at the car behind me. No hesitation. No fear. I wanted them to know I see you. I'm describing you. Your car. Your lights. Your license plate. I'm watching. And I'll remember. Minutes later, like a mirage, a gas station appeared. I swerved in, parked right next to the storefront window, and ran inside. Breathless. I'm being followed. That car, he's outside. The clerk looked at me, a wild-eyed woman with tangled hair, and immediately stepped out to look. But the car was gone. Vanished. No sign of it. As if it had never existed. Or worse. As if it was still out there. Watching. Waiting for me to let my guard down. I stood there, heart still pounding, then looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was still me, but somehow different. Sharper. Stronger. Someone who had learned the hard way that survival doesn't come from hoping someone will save you. It comes from instinct. And listening to it. I filled my tank under the station's harsh fluorescent lights, never taking my eyes off the lot. When I drove away, I didn't follow my GPS anymore. I followed myself. Since that night, I've understood one thing. When you're a woman, alone at night, that uneasy feeling? It's not your imagination. It's a warning. Listen to it. And don't wait for someone else to understand or rescue you. You have to be the first person to believe yourself. That was a wild ride. Can you imagine being followed for 60 miles like that? What would you have done in that situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Story 2, The Fugitive. I was once at rock bottom. 2 years ago, I worked maintenance for a cheap apartment complex in Birmingham, Alabama, a place where every kind of person society wanted to forget gathered. I made $200 a week, living in a damp, peeling room with terrible plumbing and electricity. But for a drug addict like me at the time, that was enough to keep sinking deeper into illusion. I met Tony in the 3rd month. He appeared out of nowhere, neat, quiet, different from the chaos around us. This Native American man in his early 40s didn't speak much, but when he did, he had a strong, clear northern accent. Tony was very skilled in flooring and plumbing. We worked together, lived next door to each other, and used together. Tony only started to speak the truth when he was high. During those times, he would talk about a group, the Red Mafia, in the Midwest where he had grown up. At first, I laughed, thinking it was some wild story. But one time, I looked into Tony's eyes as he talked about one of his jobs. His eyes had no light. They were just a black, empty hole. It was as if he was reliving a moment, and that sent a chill down my spine. I once asked, "Do you want to talk more?" Tony shook his head and gave a weak smile. "It's a past life. Let's go get some stuff." That night, the dealer we knew canceled. Tony said he knew another guy. When the car showed up, I felt uneasy. Very uneasy. Tony took the money, leaned into the car window, and suddenly yelled, "Fuck that, you're playing me." Then he grabbed the guy by the neck, dragging him out through the window. Before the dealer could react, Tony started pounding him. His punches weren't just violence, they were primal rage. I screamed, "Stop! Let's go. Forget it." Tony didn't listen. His eyes were bloodshot, like he was possessed. It wasn't until the final kick to the man's head that we ran, disappearing into the night. I shouted in a panic, my heart racing, "What the hell did you do?" "I'm a white guy." "You're Native American. They'll find us." Tony glanced at me, cold as ice. "He didn't see your face. If he comes back with a gun, I'll deal with him. I've dealt with worse." That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, Tony was calm as ever, his eyes red, hands trembling slightly. He told me more, still high, mind you, about the Native American casinos. About the role he had in debt collection. "You know, on our land, the law is different. Outsiders don't get it? I started to believe him. Then the months passed. Life returned to its cycle, fixing, shooting up, laughing. But I still listened to Tony. He told me about a social security scam, forging papers for people who no longer existed and cashing their checks every month. I looked at him, forcing a smile, but my stomach twisted. If these stories were true, this man was no longer human. He was something else. I had 6 cases like that, Tony said, taking a sip of beer. Until someone betrayed us. I didn't have time to react when a drunken voice interrupted outside, "Are you done?" Tony replied, packing up his tools, smiling, walking out. I stood there, frozen. I didn't know much about Tony, but from what he said, I felt something dangerous, something unexplainable. At 3 a.m., a loud bang shook the air. The apartment felt distorted by the headlights sweeping through the windows. There was shouting outside. I jumped out of bed, opened the door, and saw a federal agent, gun aimed down, his face cold as ice. "Get back inside. Now." I couldn't breathe. My body went cold. I stepped back and closed the door. Silence. The next morning, I stepped outside. Tony's door had been smashed in. Wood splinters scattered like a corpse being dissected. I rushed to the management office, pale as a ghost. "What happened?" She answered, still shaken, "Tony wasn't Tony. He's a fugitive. He's been on the run for a long time. He used a lot of fake IDs to escape and access government-funded housing programs. He's killed several people to protect his operations." I froze. "What? Is this real?" She continued, her voice thick with emotion, "Yes. Tony killed at least 3 people to cover up his operations. He used fake IDs to get a maintenance job at HUD-funded apartments. He fooled everyone, even me. But when he went to work, no one knew what he was really doing." The fear buried deep inside me. "So, what's going to happen to me?" She hesitated. "You're not involved in the murders, but you were the one who tipped off the police, right?" I felt the ground beneath me shake. I felt like a rat caught in a trap. Would Tony come back for me? Would he remember that I was the one who pointed out his apartment when the cops showed up? The police said he wouldn't spare me. Not just for the betrayal, but because he never let anyone off the hook for a debt. From that moment on, I lived in constant fear. Every time I heard a knock on the door, I feared it might be Tony, returning to get revenge for what I had done. Yikes, a fugitive right under your nose. That's terrifying. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like something wasn't right? Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. Story 3, The Strange Story in the Abandoned Mine. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, my family moved to a remote area between old mining sites in rural Alabama. It was a strange place, with crystal clear lakes, steep rock cliffs, and countless abandoned dirt roads. Still, it was a fantastic place to explore, caves hidden deep in the mountains, winding trails through the woods, and especially swimming in the deserted lakes. However, there were also frightening things. The area was infested with venomous snakes, and at night, the darkness seemed to swallow everything. There were no street lights, only the occasional faint porch light on houses that were scattered far apart, appearing once every mile or so. One day, my best friend Patrick and I decided to walk along a dirt road we had never explored before. It was morning, around 10 a.m., on a hot summer day. We thought, why not? Let's see where it leads. We walked for a while, about a mile, and then we reached a fork in the road. Next to the fork was a small pond. We stopped, sat down, and watched some little frogs and a turtle swimming around. But as I glanced across the pond, I saw a figure walking away toward the top of the hill. I nudged Patrick and pointed at the person. Who is that? What are they doing here? We had walked deep into the mine area, with no one around, no houses nearby. We stood up, but just as we did, the figure suddenly stopped. In an instant, he turned around and ran toward us. I couldn't believe my eyes. He ran so fast it was unbelievable. He ran down the hill, around the pond, and reached us in just a few seconds. The distance from where he stood to us was at least 300 meters, yet he covered it so quickly. Patrick and I immediately turned and ran, running as if we had nothing left to lose. We only knew to run, not daring to look back. But when I looked back, I saw him chasing us with incredible speed, as if he were not human. He barely seemed to need to stop, just charging toward us. He grabbed me, but Patrick and I managed to jump into a ditch by the side of the road and hide behind some bushes. I peeked out, and he was about 30 to 40 feet away, standing in the road, spinning around and making strange growling sounds, as though searching for something. And the strangest thing was, I could see that he was holding a roasted chicken in his hand, gripping it tightly as if he were devouring it wildly. He wore tattered work clothes, filthy boots, and had an enormous forehead that protruded nearly 4 inches from his eyes. His appearance made me feel like I was facing a prehistoric creature, not a normal human. He was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. He turned around and began running back the way he came. We lay still in the bushes for almost an hour, not daring to move, just listening and watching. We could only crawl along the edge of the trail until we saw the main road. From there, we ran as fast as we could back home. When we got home, we told our fathers about the encounter. My father and Patrick's older brother immediately grabbed weapons and set out to find the man, but they never found him. This story has haunted me all these years. But recently, a strange coincidence occurred. My girlfriend took me to visit her grandmother, who lived right next to the old mine. I told her the story, and she looked at me very seriously and said, "You kids are lucky, many strange things have happened in that mine." Since then, every time I visit her grandmother, I always carry a Glock and a 12-gauge shotgun for protection. I don't know what's going on there, but I feel like I haven't fully escaped the things I witnessed. Sometime later, I had forgotten about it until I told my father the story. He reminded me of something I had overlooked. On the last day of summer, I was beaten badly by a group of friends. To cheer me up, my parents bought me a Kawasaki motocross bike. My dad also had an old Honda racing bike, and we often went out to the mine area to ride. One day, while riding deeper into the mine, I saw a wooden crate by the side of the road, buried in the bushes. Curiously, I went closer to check it out and found it filled with straw, an old blanket, and a pillow. I called my dad over and showed him. He looked around and then said, "If someone is living here, they definitely don't want to be disturbed. Let's go." We hopped on our bikes and went home without incident. However, the strange thing was, that night, my dad sat outside on the porch, turned off the lights, and just sat quietly looking into the forest. I didn't understand why he did that, but I felt that something wasn't right. Now, I realize that perhaps all these things were connected in a strange way that I still don't fully understand. All I can do now is tell the story, but deep inside, I still have so many questions. Was the man Patrick and I saw really there? Was he a deranged wanderer or some kind of strange creature we couldn't explain? How long had he been living in that mine area, and why hadn't the authorities found him? And if he's still there, will he come back and look for us? Every time I tell the story, people are either shocked or don't believe me, but I know, no matter how hard I try to explain, I can't prove anything. They think it's just a scary story without any real basis. But to me, everything is still clear, and I still question myself. How could a person run that fast, like he wasn't human anymore? How could someone stand and spin around on the road, making growling noises as if he were something other than a normal person? But these questions have never had answers. And every time I return to the mine, even after all these years, I can't help but feel an invisible unease, as if what I saw is still there, lurking in the darkness. Is he still there, hiding deep within the mine? Will I encounter him again? The questions keep spinning in my mind. As for my girlfriend's grandmother, when she said, "You kids are lucky," I couldn't help but feel a chill. All the rumors she mentioned didn't seem to be just idle talk. Perhaps she had heard many strange stories about the mine, and those stories weren't just imagined. Now, every time I drive past the abandoned mine, I can't help but think that one day, I might encounter that strange man again, or maybe he has already started watching me, waiting for the right moment. Maybe there are things we'll never know, and dark secrets that remain buried under the dust of the past. Since that encounter, every visit to my girlfriend's grandmother, I never forget to bring my Glock and 12-gauge shotgun. It feels like the mind still clings to me, and whether I want it or not, the ghosts of the past will always be there, never letting us rest. And so, the question still remains unanswered: are the rumors about the abandoned mine true? Are the strange and terrifying things still waiting for someone brave enough to face them? Wow, that abandoned mine story gave me chills. Would you dare explore a creepy place like that? Let me know what you think about this eerie tale down below. Story 4, I dated an assassin, and survived. I once dated a hitman. A man no one would believe was capable of killing until I stepped into that room. I grew up in a small town in Alabama. Life was quiet, uneventful. After I graduated high school, I started dating a guy a few years older than me. His name was Sean, or at least, that's what he told me. Sean was tall, handsome, built like he lived at the gym. On our very first date, he told me he used to be in one of the most notorious gangs in the country. I wasn't sure why he would share something like that, but he explained that he grew up in a rough neighborhood, didn't have many choices. He said he'd left that life behind. I'm not someone who trusts easily, but Sean had never treated me badly. He was respectful, almost too polite. I even looked up the tattoos and gang signs he mentioned. Everything matched. It checked out. I wanted to believe in something good. I wanted to believe people could change. We dated for a few weeks before I decided to spend the night at his apartment for the first time. I had been busy before, and I like to take things slow. So this was a big step for me. When I arrived, one of Sean's friends was already there. I found it odd this was my first night staying over, and he'd invited someone else. It got weirder when that friend later told me, in a quiet moment, that he used to be in a gang too. But it wasn't Sean's old gang, it was a rival one. They laughed together like old war buddies. But there was something cold in their eyes. After his friend left, Sean and I went into his room, and that's when I saw it. An entire arsenal of weapons. I'm not talking about a handgun or two. I mean bulletproof vests, grenades, and what looked like an AK-47 lying under the bed. It felt like I had just stepped into a mercenary's bunker. Half joking, half frozen, I asked, "Are you planning to start a war?" Sean just smiled and tilted his head, giving me a look that made my blood run cold. Then, casually, too casually, he said, "I never actually left the gang. In fact, I still work for them, sometimes." I blinked. "Doing what?" He looked me straight in the eyes and replied, "Hitman. Not active lately. But if a job comes, I'll take it." He said it like he was talking about the weather. His voice was flat. No emotion. Just emptiness. And that's when I realized this man, this charming, polite, beautiful man was a sociopath. I've met people who lie for clout, pretend to be gangsters or killers. Sean wasn't pretending. He wasn't one of those. I didn't leave that night. I didn't scream. I didn't run. People ask me why I didn't. But if you've ever looked into the eyes of someone who's killed, you'd understand. Reacting strongly would have been the most dangerous thing I could do. I stayed quiet. I smiled. I acted like everything was fine. I laid awake that whole night, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to every creak in the walls. The air smelled faintly of gun oil. And I remember thinking, what if this is the last night of my life? The next morning, I got up, said goodbye, and left. I blocked his number. He never tried to contact me again. Maybe he wasn't interested. Or maybe, he was waiting. I never told anyone. Until now. And no, I didn't call the police. If you've seen what I saw, felt what I felt, you'd know why. That man had killed before. I could feel it in his silence. Sometimes, at night, I hear a car slow down in front of my house, then drive away. I don't look out the window. I just listen. Because leaving a hitman doesn't mean you're free. Dating an assassin? That's straight out of a thriller. How would you have reacted if you discovered someone you loved was hiding such a dark secret? Comment your thoughts below, I'm curious. Story 5, Boomer, my four-legged hero. I'm a 13-year-old boy living with my family in a small rural town in Alabama. And this is the story of Boomer, my dog, and my lifesaver. Boomer is a Doberman mix with some hound in his blood. Sharp eyes, a proud stance. Though just a dog, he carries in him the instincts of a loyal soldier, alert, sharp, and never leaving those he loves behind. Over time, I learned to understand Boomer's language. He had different sounds for different things, a soft whine when he was hungry or thirsty, a deep bark that meant something's not right, and a fierce growl when real danger approached. But the sound I feared the most was his chilling howl, what my grandma called his ghost howl, the one he made when he saw something that no one else should see. That night, I was in my room reading scary stories on Reddit when I heard Boomer barking outside. It was a mix of whining and low barking, odd, even for him. I ran out to the backyard where he was chained near the empty field behind our house. The night air was cool, the smell of damp grass and earth hanging heavy. I found Boomer standing still, ears rigid, eyes locked on something in the darkness. The ridge of fur along his back bristled like barbed wire. I walked toward him to calm him down, but just as I got close, something lunged at me from the bushes. Everything stopped. My body froze, my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I let out a weak yell as a man rushed toward me, but before he could reach me, Boomer let out a snarl and launched himself forward like a bolt of lightning. He bit down hard on the man's arm, yanking him to the ground. The guy screamed in pain, flailing wildly. He kicked Boomer hard in the side. I heard the yelp. A horrible, sharp sound I'd never heard from him before. But Boomer didn't let go. Blood started to stain his fur, but he stayed latched on. Lights came on in the house. My grandma shouted from the kitchen window and grabbed the phone. My grandpa burst out the back door with his shotgun ready. Seeing the gun, the man panicked, kicked Boomer one last time, and took off running into the night, disappearing like a ghost. Boomer limped back to me, collapsing onto the grass. Blood dripped from a wound on his front leg, and one ear was torn. I fell to my knees, wrapping my arms around him. He trembled slightly from the pain, but still managed to lick my hand, as if trying to comfort me. The police came but never found the man. They said it could have been a thief stalking our home from the empty lot behind us. But maybe, when he saw me, a kid, he changed his plan. We took Boomer to the vet that very night. His injuries weren't too serious, but I knew he had risked his life for me. Later, some neighbors commented how sad it was that Boomer was chained outside. I get their concern. But I'm just a kid, I don't get to decide where Boomer stays. Still, after that night, I promised myself I'd care for him like family, no, more than family, like the silent hero he truly was. He didn't need a cape. He didn't need thanks. Just those loyal eyes and a brave heart. Boomer became my hero that night, forever. Boomer truly was a hero. Can you believe how brave he was? If you've ever had an animal protect you or keep you safe, share your story in the comments. I want to hear about your four-legged heroes. Story 6, The Road to Bay St. Louis. In 2004, I was 22 years old, living in the cold Rocky Mountains for far too long, feeling drained. Music, especially Jimmy Buffett's songs about tropical places, had worked its way deep into my soul. Those songs about faraway lands and wild adventures planted a dream in me. A life of exploration awaited me out there. I was tired of the endless winters. Why was I stuck in this cold when warmer lands were calling to me? So, I packed up all my things and hit the road. My goal? Mobile, Alabama, Jimmy's hometown, and then Florida. I imagined working on a boat in exchange for a trip to places like Jamaica. A perfect plan, at least, I thought so. I crossed through Texas and Arkansas, and along the way, I encountered interesting stories, like the time a band of hippies gave me a ride through the desert. But that wasn't the creepy part of the story. No, the real nightmare started when I reached Louisiana. As I drove down I-10, I crossed over the Atchafalaya Basin, a vast wetland area and the third longest bridge in the US. I'd heard that anyone foolish enough to walk across this bridge would get arrested. So, I got stuck on the Lafayette side, trying to hitch a ride across. Time passed. Then, a white van pulled up. The man in the van looked to be in his 60s or 70s, heavy set, wearing only a pair of shorts. His eyes had something off about them, like he was sizing me up. I climbed into the van, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. As the van sped across the bridge, the song "When the Sun Goes Down" by Kenny Chesney played. A strange choice of song for a situation like this. The man began looking at me in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hey, kid," he said in a thick Cajun accent, "you got a big one, don't you?" I froze. Did I hear that right? Sorry. I stammered, but I didn't dare look away. The bridge stretched on forever. There was no escape. No way out. He didn't stop. "I guess you've got a pretty big one," he said, smiling to himself. I could feel my heart pounding. The only thing between me and the swamp below was the van and the man beside me, who was now staring at me as if I were some kind of object. My stomach twisted. I couldn't escape. "No, I don't think so," I answered, trying to sound calm. But he wouldn't stop. "I want to take you into the swamp," he said, his eyes lighting up. "Fuck that," I said, trying to hide the tremble in my voice. "I don't want to go into the swamp with you." "Oh, come on, it'll just take about 30 minutes, he insisted. His voice now had a menacing tone. By now, my mind was racing with the worst-case scenarios. Was he going to ignore my refusal? Was he going to force me to go with him? Did he have plans to hurt me, to drag me into the swamp and do things I couldn't even imagine? Every terrible thought flashed through my mind. Alligators, water. I couldn't escape. I was trapped. The bridge seemed to stretch on forever as he kept looking at me, smiling smugly. I didn't know what scared me more, the creepy smile or the fact that the bridge still didn't end. It felt like it would never stop. Finally, when we reached the other side of the bridge, I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I jumped out of the van as soon as it stopped, barely managing to mutter a half-hearted thanks, my body still trembling. As I watched the van drive away, I let out a sigh of relief. I was safe. My journey continued for a few more days, but I couldn't shake the feeling that another danger might be waiting for me on the next stretch of road. When I finally arrived in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, I was lucky to be picked up by a kind woman who later became my foster mom. Although the journey had been full of dangers, it led me to a new life. However, there was still one more terrifying encounter I had to share. Before reaching Bay St. Louis, I was picked up by a man and his wife in Walker, Louisiana. They seemed friendly, inviting me to stay in their guest room. Hungry, I agreed. But that night, I heard screaming and the sound of a gunshot. The man fired a shot into the ceiling, shouting at his wife. I didn't know what to think. Was he dangerous? Was I next? But fortunately, I kept my composure and knew that I wasn't out of danger yet. The next morning, his wife drove me out to the highway, and I continued on my way, though I was still shaken. As I made my way south, I realized that not every adventure is like the songs. The road I traveled was full of threats and fears, but it also led me to safety and a new family. It wasn't the journey I had imagined, but in the end, it was the journey I needed. And, as strange as it was, I didn't regret it. I found a new life, and that was its own adventure. The road to Bay St. Louis was definitely not as peaceful as it seemed. Have you ever had a creepy or mysterious experience while traveling? Share your thoughts or stories in the comments below. Story 7, The Lesson from Strangers, a story about vigilance. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, I lived with my family in a small town in Alabama, where everyone knew everyone. We lived in a duplex subdivision, right near a small rental office with residents' mailboxes outside on the wall. One of my favorite tasks was going to get the mail. One particular day, my younger sister, who was about 5 or 6, asked to come with me. Our duplex was right behind the office, at the top of a small grassy hill. I was retrieving the mail when a middle-aged white couple pulled up in front of the building. This detail is significant, as in the 1980s, our neighborhood was primarily black, while the white residents lived on the other side of the railroad tracks. I knew many of them, as most families had lived there for generations, but I had never seen this couple before. The woman in the passenger seat rolled down her window and asked, "Excuse me, can we ask you all for directions?" I had been taught about stranger danger, so I planned to just ignore them. My sister, however, was starting to walk toward the car window, and I turned my back slightly, still focused on getting the mail. I quickly grabbed her hand and urged her to run back to the house. She asked why, but the woman continued calling us to the car. I raised my voice and told her to run up the hill immediately. She started running up the hill, and I followed. When I reached the top, I looked back and saw the driver standing a few feet from the bottom of the hill. I began mocking him, laughing and telling him that I had beaten him, that he was too slow. I even stuck my tongue out at him. The driver turned and walked back to his car. I rushed inside and never mentioned the incident to anyone at the time, not even my mother. It wasn't until I was about 15 or 16 that I realized the real danger we had been in. One day, I told my mom about the incident, and she was visibly shaken. She warned me about the dangers of strangers and reminded me to always be cautious. The truly chilling part came a few weeks later when I saw a news report about 2 child kidnappers. The description of the couple from the report made my blood run cold. I realized it was the same couple we had encountered that day. They had been caught abducting children in nearby areas, and I was horrified to think that we had almost fallen victim to them. Looking back now, I feel grateful that we escaped that situation unharmed, but I also have a much deeper understanding of the importance of vigilance, especially when it comes to strangers. That lesson from strangers is so powerful. It really makes you think about how important vigilance is. Have you ever had an encounter with someone that made you feel uneasy? Share your experience in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in to Whispers in the Dark. We hope these stories kept you on the edge of your seat. If you enjoyed these tales, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more chilling stories. Also, if you have any true scary experiences you'd like to share, feel free to send them to us. We would love to feature your story here on the channel. Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts on tonight's stories. Which one gave you the chills? Or maybe you have a story of your own that's even more terrifying. We want to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and always listen to your gut. The darkness is never far behind.